3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Happy Hour podcast. I am your host, Ricky Valero. On today's episode, we are going to take a look at week 2 of the NFL. We have so much to talk about. Obviously, week 1 was just one of the craziest week 1s we have seen in recent time. We're going to share some thoughts on tonight's Thursday night football game. We got Matthew Fox's games of the week, fantasy football start and sit, my week 2 best bets, and of course, we end the show with the movie corner. As always, I am joined by my partner here who's living up in the city of Arizona, or state of Arizona right now, Mr. Matthew Fox. How are you, bud?
Yeah, just wrapping up my week here on assignment, basking in the Chiefs' glory. You know, I'm a longtime Chiefs stan, so wait. Monday was rough.
Look, the only thing I think that you have going in your favor because of that game was just the fact that how crazy week 1 was, right?
Yeah, I guess. It was, spent all of Sunday and the first half of Monday with all these rowdy Chiefs fans and then put on my Broncos polo. Fortunately, I was locked in an escape room as they were making some poor life decisions in the fourth quarter. So I was spared watching it live. I looked at it on my phone, wept a little, came home, fired up the footage, wept some more.
So I heard Peyton Manning had screamed at his TV 67 times or whatever to go for it. Did you do the same? Yeah. It was okay. So the one thing that I noticed from week 1, obviously people forget that there's going to be that process change, right? This is the first live action a lot of these guys have seen. You're not getting those repetitions in preseason. Practice is totally different from live game. But the big thing for me is this, that we can excuse some of what we saw in week 1 because of that. Because I've always liked to bring up now the Jaguars came out, beat the Colts week 1. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. And everybody's like, maybe the Jags are going to be something. And then they lost 15 straight and went 1-15. So I like to always bring that up. That's mainly for my buddy Chris because he, the Bears won week 1 and here we are. Now he's one step closer to his bet being right. But with that being said, I can't excuse the coaches' piss poor clock management and time management on the sidelines. You've got Vrabel was terrible at the end of that Titans game. And of course, Hackett here at the end of this game. These are coaches that have been around for a long time. Like you can't make excuses for the time, right?
So there's a couple of things that I take away. If you read my Monday recap, one of my takeaways from Sunday was preseason reps might not be as overrated as we've been led to believe. You had a lot of teams, whether it be the opening game Thursday with the Rams or the Bengals on Sunday or the Cowboys on Sunday night or Green Bay each of the last 2 years who never played their starters and rolled out there looking rusty. Well, Denver's in that same boat. Hackett, you have a new coach, new quarterback, new offensive scheme. They didn't bother to play a single snap together. Neither did they do that with the defense and the new defensive scheme. And I think particularly seeing Geno Smith look like a poor man's Joe Montana there in the first half has to be a little bit of a worrying sign that, you saw in the second half, Denver didn't allow them to score a single point. Well, that tells me that you just weren't ready for prime time with all your guys and all your positions. The other thing, though, it was a very concerning start for me watching Hackett, losing a game, those kind of things happen. But we moved on from Vic Fangio because he couldn't get enough out of the offense. They were an undisciplined team, and clock management was terrible. Well, we scored 16 points, scored 3 points in 4 red zone trips, 12 penalties. Hard to be a little more undisciplined than that. And I know you're going to get a couple of penalties because of the noise in Seattle, but that does not account for everything. And then the clock management and the decision-making at times, particularly in the second half, was terrible. He has time to get better, but as a Broncos fan who, had high hopes for a new coach coming in to specifically address these 3 areas, seeing those 3 areas be the downfall yet again was infuriating.
Yeah, it's wild. And what makes it worse, it's not like, all right, we saw the Bills blow out the Rams, right? That's one thing. We knew the Bills were going to be one of the best teams in football. The Rams did come out a little flat. They did make some mistakes that maybe defending Super Bowl champions shouldn't, but there was a few key changes in that offense as well. It's understandable to get beat on week one by one of the teams that you consider being one of the best, right? But across the NFL, you had the Titans, who were a playoff team, 1 seed a year ago. And then, of course, you had the Broncos, who paid a lot of money to bring Russell in there. They paid a lot of money, and they brought the coach in. They brought Hackett in there. You lose to quite possibly 2 of the worst teams in the NFL, right? That's something that is inexcusable. I feel the same way about the Colts right now. The Colts, the Texans are terrible. I don't care what anybody says. Davis Mills is not a good quarterback. He's serviceable for what they're doing right now, but they came out very flat as well. And I blame that as well on just not being ready. You know what I mean? Matt Ryan, first real game action with these guys, this unit. I don't understand what they're doing at receiver. They still don't have any receivers outside of Pittman, really. I didn't understand why they didn't address that this offseason. I know they did a couple later in the draft, but again, we're talking about teams made a lot of changes, and some of these teams came out falling flat. But with that being said, we're already rushing in to week 2. This year's going to fly right by, and we're going to drop in and talk about news and notes. The biggest news of the weekend, obviously, Dak Prescott. And this one breaks my heart because I love Dak. I do, and I do think that he is a very good quarterback. And whether it's the injuries or just the Cowboys' inability to run a decent offense, the offense looked abysmal regardless when he was on the field. You can tell that them getting rid of Cooper was a massive hole in this offense that they're trying to funnel through CD and just Dalton Schultz and Zeke and Pollard, trying to get all these other, makeshift kind of items in there. They missed Cooper bad, but the injuries were took a toll. Prescott out potentially 4 or 5 weeks, depending on what it looks like. They're not putting him on the IR, so that's a good thing, but also something to keep an eye on. Elijah Mitchell out. So now, we got the 49ers who will probably run, Jeff Wilson this week for 20 carries, and then next week, Marlon Mack, who they just picked up, might have 35. So that's going to be fun. This is going to be an even more pitfall of a running back situation. Najee Harris is hurt, apparently okay, but again, it's something to keep a monitor on. TJ Watt got hurt. That's huge. Now, he's apparently not out for this season, but pec injury is going to be hard to come back from, especially for as an aggressive and a violent player that he is. I mean, he was wrecking havoc this past week on the Bengals, and you saw that. But as soon as he came off the field, you knew something was wrong. Another crazy game, that Steelers-Bengals game was insane. The fact that Bengals were even in that game kind of highlights how bad that Steelers offense is right now. But thoughts on the injuries?
So I'm going to take them in reverse. The Steelers as a whole, they actually did something that some of these other teams didn't, and that is protect themselves against injury. One of the most underrated trades right at the end of the preseason, Steelers went out and got Malik Reed from the Broncos. He led the Broncos in sacks the last couple of seasons. He's the primary backup to TJ Watt. Nobody is TJ Watt, but they worked on developing. I liked what Highsmith did on Sunday. You have Malik Reed coming in there. I think that unit can hold together for a few weeks. Still have a lot of talent. Najee Harris, part of me thinks they'd be better off sitting him for a week or 2 and trying to get him healthy. He has that Liz Frank issue now, high ankle sprain. Doesn't seem like they're going to do that. The more worrying thing for me, though, in that area is their offensive line did not look greatly improved. They were not opening lanes for running. So that is something to look at. The Mitchell situation is tough. I thought it was going to be tough with Trey Lance growing pains. We didn't see a great week 1 performance. Looks like he's going to be missing Kittle again in week 2. Now Mitchell's out, and they're kind of shuffling that backfield. And Seattle looks a lot better than we thought they were going to look. We'll have more on that in a minute, but I'm wondering after these first 3 or 4 weeks what the cries from fans are going to be for Jimmy G behind Trey Lance. I think it was rolling the dice in a terrible way to keep him behind them. And for Dallas, Dallas is another team that I would chalk into that group of teams that decided they didn't need to play starters a single snap. They looked rusty. They're really missing Tyron Smith. They lost Connor McGovern early in that game, so they had a brand new left side of the offensive line. Seems sort of important to me. And then there were some head-scratching calls, especially early. You're facing the Buccaneers, who have a pretty stout defensive front, and you're doing all these weird triple end arounds. I mean, they lost massive yardage on a lot of those things. I think Kellen Moore got a little too cute by half there. They are going to need a lot of luck with Cooper Rush. Hopefully, Dak is only 4 weeks. They had said originally could be up to 8 weeks. He broke a bone, had surgery. They're putting a screw and a plate into the throwing thumb. That doesn't seem great to me. With how Washington looked and how Philly looks, I think Dallas is probably at best going to be a third-place team in that division, and I think that basically slammed their playoff window shut when Dak got hurt, because they're going to have trouble surviving that early stretch.
One of the things I was impressed with week one with was Washington's defense, right? I understand it's the Jaguars, but they came out and played a little bit better. They settled in a little bit more in the second half, and I was kind of impressed with their ability to get to the pass, get to the quarterback, because they kind of had Trevor Lawrence dancing around a little bit. I think Trevor Lawrence looked really good, though, compared to what we saw from last year. He did have some moments of where he missed some wide open throws, but I think it was just because of the pass rush. And I'll say this, Carson Wentz didn't look terrible. He did have a bonehead pick, which you're going to get from Wentz. You know what I mean? You're going to get at least one or two bonehead plays from him. But Johan Johnson looks like the real deal as well. So I'm excited because, we're going to find out real fast who is or isn't a real thing in the NFL come week 2. And speaking of which, week 2, let's talk about Thursday Night Football. We got quite possibly the biggest game of the weekend starting on Thursday here. We have the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. And the only thing that's really upsetting is the amount of injuries that we've got going into this game. We don't have a healthy Keenan Allen, which is going to be tough. But some of the other players for the Chargers are going to have to step up. We're going to see what Josh Palmer's got. I love Gerald Everett before the season started. I talked him up a lot. He looked really good last week. I think he's an easy guy that has to start for your team right now, especially tonight against the Chiefs. No Keenan Allen. I'm concerned. You know what I mean? I think that's going to hinder the Chargers, but I'll tell you what, man. Justin Herbert looks like he's been playing for 10 years. It's impressive to watch him throw the football. It's impressive to see the way he commands the offense at such a young age. You don't get that right out the gate. And there were so many questions about, not by me because I loved Herbert coming out, but there was so many questions about his leadership and what he was able to do on the football field. And I think he's done a very good job over these last few years, really kind of wiping that away. And another thing you have to look at is, could you imagine if the Dolphins took Herbert, where they would be right now versus where they are right now with Tua? Not saying Tua had some rough moments, not saying Tua did look terrible, but I think we'd be talking about a whole different thing with Herbert, Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill on the football field. But another impressive thing, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who just dominated the backfield this week. And I know everybody's talking about Pachiki, whatever his name was. But everybody doesn't realize most of his carries came in the second half after the game was already under wraps. But your biggest questions of the week were no Keenan Allen. Should we be concerned? I think so. I think that this favors the Chiefs a lot. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think that he's going to be a weekly start for now. What do you think, Fox?
Yeah, for the Chargers, one great thing about Justin Herbert too, not great for those of us who are in fantasy and want to rely on these receivers, is he's been great at spreading the ball around and using whoever he has at his disposal. We saw that again last week. I think Palmer will be involved. DeAndre Carter looked decent last week, probably get involved. But I do expect 3 guys to kind of step up and carry the load. They need to get Mike Williams more involved. The Chiefs don't have a terrible secondary, but they don't have any real superstars in that secondary. I think there is going to be a big push to get Mike Williams. He's clearly their best receiver. Love what we saw from Gerald Everett last week. I have him as a top 10 play again this week. I think he's tracking toward being a tight end one. Feels like a really good fit there. And then Austin Eckler. He had a ho-hum game in week 1. I think they'll get him more involved and get him going a little bit more. Those guys will help. On the Chiefs side, you're right about Pacheco. He didn't make an appearance until the Chiefs were up 37-7. That's a 30-point lead. The game was over. I was sitting in my hotel room watching the Fairweather Arizona fans file out midway through the third quarter. Then Pacheco kind of went off. He looked decent, but Edwards-Helaire, 7 carries, 42 yards, caught 3 passes, 32 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Doesn't sound incredibly impressive, but he probably would have had a lot more of a role if the Chiefs hadn't just been waxing the Cardinals. They really didn't need to put him out there. He had a great yards per carry. He looked like he was involved in all 3 phases. We never saw Ronald Jones. It was him and a little bit of Jerick McKinnon while the game was still being contested. I think you're right. He goes back to having the potential that we thought we saw when he was drafted. I never thought he was going to be a high-end running back one like what a vintage Kareem Hunt in that offense was, but I thought he could be a serviceable running back too. I think that's back to being the case. I have him down in the 20s this week. I think he can have a good chance to make an impact. And if you get on one of those runs where he gets 2 or 3 touchdowns, which they come in bunches sometimes with Mahomes, he can give you that top 12 upside. But I think he's going to be involved and going to be an integral part. I like what the Chiefs – I don't like it as a Broncos fan, but I like what the Chiefs were doing in spreading the ball around. I think that's made that offense even more terrifying and dynamic because you're not just focusing – on Kelsey and Hill, although Kelsey's going to get his. They were using MVS. They were using John Hamler's favorite player, Juju Smith-Schuster. They were using Sky Moore. They were using Mecole Hardman. They were using the backs. They used 2 or 3 different tight ends. It really made it tough to defend, and I think that's going to be the big problem for the Chargers tonight, especially with J.C. Jackson still a bit banged up.
Yeah, he completed passes to 9 different receivers last week. I talked about this when I talked about the Chiefs on our AFC episode. I felt like the Chiefs were going to be more dangerous now without Tyreek than they were with Tyreek because for me, Kelsey's always going to get his. It doesn't matter who the receiver on the football team is, he's going to get his. But I felt like if Mahomes is able to spread the ball around the way he did this week, you're going to see something that's going to be absurd out of this man. And I really still believe that. I mean, I said he was one of my MVP picks. It was either him or Lamar Jackson, and Lamar looked really good this past week for a guy that can't apparently throw the ball down the field. He threw the ball down the field pretty well last week, but Mahomes looked great. I still think that he's gonna get his, and he even said it before the season started. I feel sorry for fantasy owners because he's gonna divvy that ball up everywhere. And I mean, you're talking about you had 5 different guys with 3+ catches last week. He's going to throw the ball around, and it's going to be a weekly thing where it's a mess. But outside of Kelsey, I kind of like McKinnon tonight at a flex play. If the Chargers can stay, it's a very volatile flex play just because you're talking about if the Chargers have to stay in the game. But I don't hate him in that slot. But for the winner tonight, I do have the Chiefs winning this game. I really want to see Herbert do his thing, but we're in Arrowhead. We're on 3 days rest. We're talking about taking on a team. Both these quarterbacks are going to look great tonight, but I have the Chiefs winning. It might be a little bit closer than I think than obviously the Arizona game was, but would it surprise me if the Chiefs win by 10+? No, it wouldn't. What about you, Fox?
Yeah, I think the AFC West is going to beat up on each other all season long. I see a lot of splits. I'm going with the home team Chiefs as well.
Yeah, I remember whenever I did my thing, predictions, it was like, all right, everybody in the division 3-3, let's move on with our lives. You know what I mean? But with that being said, we're going to go into Matthew Fox's games of the week. Do you want me to change the quarterback, though? I mean, do I have to change that back graph? All right, I'll let you go. Sorry.
So my Sunday early game this week, a divisional matchup. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers head into New Orleans to take on the Saints. Both teams started out 1-0. The Saints really made us sweat it out in what should have been an easier matchup with Atlanta. But I'm going to leave you with the number 4-0. That is the Saints' regular season record with Tom Brady as quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Can Tampa Bay win a regular season game against New Orleans? I think they will this year, but I don't think it's going to be this week in New Orleans. I am looking forward to this one. Michael Thomas is all the way back. It seems like that made my heart happy. Liked what they had with Jarvis Landry. I think they've got some stuff going. And for whatever reason, the Buccaneers seem to scuffle. They'll probably be without Chris Godwin this week, the way it's tracking. Julio Jones is still 95 years old. You can't tell me that he's still a top 20 receiver. I'd have to see it for 75 weeks in a row before I was buying that. My afternoon game that I want to highlight is the Cardinals at the Raiders, two teams that did not have a great experience on opening day. The Cardinals got shellacked at home. They don't have a ton more to be optimistic about in this one, although Rondale Moore could play. Will he be better than Greg Dortch? Signs point to no. I'm not a huge Rondale Moore fan, but maybe it'll be nice to have him out there. The Raiders, on the other hand, they actually didn't look that bad. They just got killed by turnovers. I think a little bit of rust. They were one of those teams that didn't really play starters in the preseason. I think they're going to come out strong in Las Vegas, and they'll be the ones to get off the snide and start 1-0. I think it's going to be a tough start for Arizona, but both these teams, if you can have a desperation game in week 2, I think both these teams who have playoff aspirations come in with that. Sunday night game, Bears at the Packers. It's not a big shock that one of these teams is 1-0, one of these teams is 0-1. The shock is which team is which. The Bears coming off a pretty inspiring win against the 49ers at home, 19-10. Meanwhile, the Green Bay Packers still haven't arrived for the game against the Minnesota Vikings. We could see Alan Lazard in this one. I think that can do nothing but wonders for Aaron Rodgers. I also think home cooking is going to help get them going. I expect a better game from Aaron Jones. The guy averaged almost 9 yards carry, or over 9 yards a carry, but they only let him carry it 5 times for reasons surpassing understanding. They also gave more targets to A.J. Dillon than Aaron Jones, again, for reasons surpassing understanding. I think Aaron Jones gets more involved. Aaron Rodgers has said he owns the Bears. I think the Bears will put up some fight, but the Packers will get their first win. And then my upset special this week, I was so close. I had several upsets on the docket, and last week I went with the Lions over the Eagles. The Eagles look really good, but the Lions made a fierce comeback. I was hanging on. I only lost by 3 points. Well, you know what? I'm doubling down on another team that I picked to get upset in week 1, and that was the 49ers. They did get upset by the Bears. Does not look like Kittle's going to play. Elijah Mitchell is out. I think there's growing pains with Trey Lance. I think the Seahawks are a little bit better than people gave credit for, and they're one of the teams that actually played their starters in all 3 preseason games. They definitely look like they were better prepared and better in the groove. This is always kind of a fierce rivalry. I don't think it's a blowout game, but I think the Seahawks end up covering the spread and turning over the 49ers.
I like it. I like it a lot. I like some controversial picks there. Yeah. You know what? I was so mad. I was very confident in the Vikings winning that football game, and I just never bet on the Vikings to win that football game. But with that being said, we're going to transition into our next segment, the Fantasy Football Start and Sit. All right, folks, we're back with our Fantasy Football Start and Set. With that being said, I'm excited because each week, Matthew Fox and I share our starts and sits. And my starts for the week, I just mentioned him, Kirk Cousins against the Minnesota Vikings. I think that he's a very solid play this week. The Eagles defense, they got beaten up on last week against the Lions. Kirk Cousins looked really good in week 1. This team looked it's just one of those teams, they clicked on all cylinders. They really did. Cousins looked good. He threw for 277 and 2 touchdowns. There's no reason in my mind he can't do that again. I think he's in that 275, 300-yard. This could be a shootout-style game unless that defense really kind of gets a hold of Jalen Hurts, but I don't think they do. 275, 2 touchdowns is an easy no-brainer for Kirk Cousins this week. I'm starting Devin Singletary this week as well. If you saw Saquon Barkley last week, holy shit. He torched this Titans defense that does not apparently want to stop the run. Singletary looked good week 1, and I think that he's going to go out here and they're going to rely on them being able to run the football on this Tennessee team. Marquise Brown is my start of the week at the wide receiver position. He looked good in week 1. And I think, as Matthew Fox suggested, you're talking about a team that is in desperation mode because you're talking about a team that normally starts off very fast. He had 443 and a touchdown in week 1. I think that he's going to replicate those stats. The Raiders secondary is decent, but not great. But we saw Herbert do Herbert things against it. Dalton Schultz is my start of the week at the tight end position. I know that's crazy to say, but I think that they need a security blanket, and a favorite security blanket of a young quarterback is definitely a tight end. So I like Dalton Schultz this week to still get his. I've already seen people talk about whether or not they should start him all over Twitter, like, oh, new quarterback, young quarterback, etc. You start the stud. He's going to get his at the end of the day. What about you, Fox?
So my standard that I use for both start and sits is top 12 quarterback, top 12 tight end, top 24 running back, receiver. I will say if Fall Off a Cliff Kingsbury starts out 0-2, that is a real red flag for the Arizona Cardinals. My start at quarterback is Carson Wentz. I know you're thinking Carson who, but he threw for 313 yards, 4 touchdowns. He finished as QB3. This week he gets the Lions, who allowed Jalen Hurts to finish as QB5. Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel both look as good as advertised. They might actually have one of the most improved wide receiving cores. Curtis Samuel, just paying me back for picking him as a fantasy MVP last year, actually looks good this year, but that benefits Carson Wentz. So he is my start this week. I have him top 10. My running back start this week, I'm going with Miles Sanders. It is an important contract year for him. He hasn't always delivered on the talent that we thought we saw, but in week 1, he carried it 13 times, got 96 yards and a touchdown, caught 2 passes for 9 yards. He finished his RB13. This week, he gets a Vikings defense that allowed quite a bit of rushing work to Detroit, allowed DeAndre Swift to go off. Jalen Hurts is going to run, but I think Miles Sanders, we can feel a little bit more confident in his workload, and the talent is there. He's still healthy right now, so I'm going with him. Wide receiver, looking at Michael Thomas for the Saints. I mentioned I thought the Saints were going to have a good shot because they seem to play really well against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. He had 8 targets last year, caught 5 of the 8 for 57 yards and 2 touchdowns, was a guy that Jameis Winston was looking for in the red zone. They really started to click in the second half. I think that was a product of not having a lot of time to work together in the preseason. Excited to see him back. You know, it hasn't been that long since he was one of the better receivers. The last one, and this one hurts, my tight end star of the week is O.J. Howard for the Houston Texans. He caught 2 passes for 38 yards, both of them touchdowns in week 1. As Michael Corleone once said, just when I thought it was out, they pull me back in. And that is the case for O.J. Howard. As I saw somebody say on Twitter, apparently all Howard needed to do to succeed was to get away from Tom Brady and Josh Allen, who are weights around his neck. Gets there to Davis Mills. This is more about the matchup play. The Broncos lost Justin Simmons, their all-world safety, for at least 4 weeks as he went on to IR. And the team last week allowed 8 receptions for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns to a combination of 3 Seahawks tight ends, most of which were not named Noah Fant. So those 2 things combined make me very nervous as a Broncos fan, but make me very happy as somebody who took a flyer on O.J. Howard.
What are your sits for the week?
So my sits for the week, quarterback sit, Trey Lance. He was QB 27 last week. I think he'll do a little bit better and get into the teens, but I don't see him finishing as top 12. Maybe when Kittle's back, I'll feel a little bit better. My running back sit, David Montgomery. The Bears line is not great. They managed to win that game, but Montgomery carried 17 times and mustered just 26 yards rushing. He was outrushed by Khalil Herbert. Herbert seems to be a factor, changing coaching staff. Looks like they're using multiple backs, so you don't get that for sure. It's all Montgomery all the time. He did have a couple of receptions. He was RB 41 last week. I think he might be a touch better than that this week, but I don't think he's going to make the top 24. My wide receiver set also going to Chicago. I'm not trying to pick on the Bears, but that Bears offense is a work in progress, if nothing else. I liked Justin Fields in the way that he managed to use the assets he had, hit Dante Pettis for a touchdown, hit Equanimeous St. Brown for a touchdown. Darnell Mooney is their best wide receiver, but he only saw 3 targets last week, only caught 1 for 8 yards. Green Bay has a decent secondary, has a decent defense. They're going to be on the road. The big thing about Mooney is he's by far their best receiver, so they're keying on him as a defense. I think that might take some time to get on track. Hopefully Mooney is a little bit better than the wide receiver 111 finish that he posted last week, but I am not putting him in my top 24. And then my tight end sit is Hunter Henry. Last year he was one of the bright spots in the Patriots offense. He was insanely efficient on his receptions versus targets, and he got a ton of touchdowns. It just doesn't seem like there's the same love for Henry with Mac Jones and, more importantly, with Matt Patricia and the play calling such as it is on offense. Week 1, he was out-targeted and out-received by Jonnu Smith, his fellow tight end. If they're going to be splitting that work, plus it's not going to be a super high-volume pass offense, this week they're going against the Steelers, who have some incredible safeties. Hunter Henry is a touchdown-dependent tight end too.
I think the tight end position just sucks, period. With that being said, you know what? We're slowly getting rid of kickers in a lot of leagues. Tight ends are next. Just throw them to the wayside. Just make everybody a wide receiver. With that being said, my sits of the week are Tua. I need to see more. I think that he looked very rough around the edges this past week. And I think that he got lucky in some points with some of the ball placement there. I don't like him against this Ravens defense. I know they have some injuries like they do every year, but I don't love the start. I like some other guys better. James Robinson's my sit at the running back position. It's crazy to see that he came out and did what he did, but I like this Colts defense. I think they're going to be much more improved and much better and settled in this week. My sits at the receiver position, Brandon Cooks, the secondary for the Broncos is very good. I like that you had OJ Howard in the tight end because I almost went there because I feel like they're going to hone in and try to take Cooks out of this game. And my other one is I don't have a tight end. I have another receiver, and that's Devontae Smith, who failed to even receive a catch in week 1. I think I'm going to sit Smith. I don't know. I think Smith just might not be worth a nickel this year, honestly. I think there's going to be weeks that he's going to be have good games, and there's going to teams that are going to hone in on Brown and maybe take him out of the game. But you're talking about a team that's very capable of running the ball. They throw the ball very fast, and that rapport between Hurts and Brown was just electric from the first drive. So I don't like Devontae Smith, and I don't really like him much moving forward. So what were your thoughts on that one real quick, Fox, on the Devontae Smith stuff?
You know,
I know it's week 1, but I just feel like I don't know if I'm going to ever be able to sell him on in my lineup each and every week. I don't have very many shares, but
well, he wasn't an incredible finisher last year for the Eagles when they had far less competition. Jalen Hurts is going to be good, but he runs a lot, and it looks like they're committing to running with running backs a lot. And then you have A.J. Brown, who's going to be a target hog, Goddard, and some other pieces out there. I didn't have Devonta Smith ranked particularly high. It's going to be better than 4 targets and no receptions, but I don't think – I'm starting to be with you. I moved him in one place that I had him preseason, and I'm pretty happy with that.
With that being said, we're going to move on to my bets of the week. All right, last week, folks, on this very show, I gave out 3 plays. I gave Patrick Mahomes over 2.5 touchdowns, which he hit in the first part of the second quarter. I gave the Ravens -7, which seemed like a no-brainer. And then, of course, as I'm ready to go 3-0, the Lions make this miraculous 95 points in the fourth quarter, which only pushed the -3 that I took on the Eagles. So my first week, I was 2-0-1, and we're heading into week 3, which a lot of questions. I don't have any spreads or money line 3 this week. I have some fun props across the board. I like the Cincinnati Bengals -3 in the first half against the Dallas Cowboys. Again, folks, that's a -3 in the first half. The Bengals are just going to be much better than this Dallas team. They're banged up. I don't see how they're going to score very many points. No matter how bad the Bengals looked last week, they still moved the ball down the field. It was a lot of bonehead mistakes, and I look for them to bounce back against this Cowboys team that were not able to I think Mixon can have a really good week as they move the ball down the field because playoff Lenny looked like playoff Lenny. And with that, I think it's going to set up the pass for the rest of the passing attack. I like the Bucs over 2.5 touchdowns. We all know, and Fox mentioned it earlier, that the Saints have this weird stranglehold over Brady in the regular season. I don't know what it is. They've beaten Brady. I think it's 4 straight times in the regular season. Will they make it 5? I don't know, but my point is this. I think the Bucs go over 2.5 touchdowns. They gave up 24 points to the Atlanta Falcons last week, and I think that this team obviously is much better. Also, key in that game is going to be playoff Lenny because the Saints did give up 120 yards on the ground to Cordell Patterson. I like the Bucs over 2.5 touchdowns. Again, what I like is the team total for the Bucs this week is 23.5. But if you take the 2.5 touchdowns, all they have to do is score 3 touchdowns. Who cares about extra points? Who cares about 2-point conversions? You just get the money off of the touchdowns. My last one of the week might surprise some folks. You know what? I don't know why this number isn't a little higher. The Titans over 1.5 touchdowns. Okay. So again, it's not points, it's touchdowns. They only have to score 2 touchdowns Monday night against the Bills. I understand the Bills looked phenomenal last week against the Rams, and the Titans, well, they lost to the Giants. You know what I mean? Again, I like to remind people that was week 1. For some reason, in the entire time Vrabel's been coach of this team, they've played down to competition and they play up against the better teams. We saw that last year throughout the entire season, especially when they beat the Rams last year without Henry, which is a wild game in itself. I don't care. I think will the Titans lose by 30? Maybe. Again, I don't care. As long as they find the end zone twice, I'll be a happy man. So just to recap real quick, Cincinnati Bengals -3 at the half against the Cowboys. The Bucs scored over 2.5 touchdowns, and the Titans on Monday night over 1.5 touchdowns. Fox, before we transition over to the final segment of the show, what did you think of my 3 picks this week?
Yeah, you noted the rushing total for New Orleans. If you add Mariota, what he did, they allowed 192 rush yards. So Saints really need to clean that up.
Basically what you're saying is Tom Brady's going to run for about 50 yards. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
Not in the entire year is he going to run for 50 yards. I think the only one I would question is the Titans, because the Rams were only able to get a touchdown in that game at home. Titans are going to be on the road. I don't know that they get 2 touchdowns. They barely got 2 touchdowns against the Giants.
I know that. It's crazy to me. I just think the number's too low. For me personally, if I was running the odds, I feel like this number should be over 2.5 touchdowns, and you're getting plus money on the over. And I don't think anybody would bet that. But you're looking at what I'm getting this at is like -150 right now, which is very solid. I think I just really feel like I feel like the Titans are going to score probably 20 or so points in this game. I just think it's going to happen. I think they play up. Could be wrong. You know what? I've been wrong before, but it's very few and far between. I'm kidding, everybody at home.
So what you're saying is the Titans are better than the Rams.
That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying in week 2 of the NFL, I expect them to score 2 touchdowns.
I knew you were a Titans stan after you took that many Titans on your redraft teams.
I hate you so much right now. With that being said, folks, we're going to transition over to our movie corner. For those of you that hang out and listen to that part, we greatly appreciate it. For those who don't, we understand as well. But make sure to check out the Music City Drive-In. We're all pumping out some great articles throughout the week, throughout the entirety of the season. It's going to be fun. Also, if you see any fun tweets on Sunday during the football games, drop them to me in a DM. On Mondays, I'm going to drop an article each week that of all the tweets that we find on the NFL, and we share amongst each other, and we drop them in an article just to share some of the funny tweets that we saw throughout the games. With that being said, we are going to transition over to the movie corner. Folks, we have a load of movies dropping this weekend, and we're just nothing short of every genre across the board. We have Pearl dropping, which is the follow-up of the movie X. See How They Run is hitting theaters, a little mystery thriller there. The Woman King starring Viola Davis. Goodnight Mommy is dropping on Prime Video, and Do Revenge is dropping on Netflix. So nothing short of a lot of content for you to consume, whether it's inside the movie theater or at home. This past week, we saw Clerks 3 is getting a more wide release this week, so that's going to be something to keep an eye on, folks. Fox, what are you catching any of these ones in theaters or on demand this weekend?
Yeah, you also forgot God's Country goes wide this week. I'm excited about many of them. I did not see X. I will probably not see Pearl. Maybe at some point on VOD. It's also Batman Day on Saturday, so I'm kind of excited about that, taking the wife to see Batman Returns on the big screen. I talked her into it by letting her know it was a Christmas film, so can't film it. I saw a couple while I've been here in Phoenix as a way to unwind at night. Saw the horror movie Barbarian that opened last week. I know you got a chance to see that one as well. I thought that was fantastic, very creative. Very unexpected. A lot of people have noted it's good to go into the movie cold. I thought that was exactly right. You don't really want to know what's going to happen so that you can just kind of be in the moment and embrace that. And I also saw Clerks 3. I saw Clerks the first time when I was in college and went through Kevin Smith's kind of canon. I've been following Jay and Silent Bob for a long time. Seeing those guys up there made me feel incredibly old. Realizing that Clerks is almost 30 years old made me feel incredibly old. Those guys talking about being 50 years old made me feel incredibly old. I was expecting a comedy. It is very poignant. I was impressed particularly by Brian O'Halloran, who plays Dante. A couple of his emotional sequences, and especially some of his back and forth with Rosario Dawson, it really gets you. And you know, his speech at the apex of the movie, and then the climax. It was a very emotional journey. It's probably my second favorite Kevin Smith movie now. I'm a big Mallrats person. I'll just, to make of that what you will. But I do like it the best of all three of the Clerks movies, and it's because of that emotional resonance that it also felt very nostalgic. Looking back at the original film, some of Kevin Smith's best performances as Silent Bob. Silent Bob picks a few times, sometimes only one time, where he's going to speak during a movie. Some fascinating insight into, as a filmmaker, making Clerks was part of his dialogue in this movie. It was very meta, but I enjoyed it a lot more than I was expecting.
Yeah, it was a very good movie. I agree with you 100,000%. It kind of impressed me with what it brought to the table. I've been yeah, it really did. I think there's another thing dropping. Is it Margu? I don't know how to. Margux.
Something like that.
Something like that. Margaux. I don't even know how to say it. I'm not good with pronunciations around here. But it came out last week. It was a good little B- thriller that I really enjoyed. It's available on VOD if you get a chance to check it out, folks at home. I think I'm seeing The Woman King today. I'm very, very excited about that. I love Viola Davis. I think she's an incredible actress. The story looks compelling and interesting. I'm going to see where that kind of lies within my Oscar predictions moving forward. Not really looking forward to Goodnight Mommy. Not something that really looks like it's going to pique my interest. Naomi Watts might make it good. Who knows? Do Revenge. Low-key excited about this. No, don't tell anybody about it. I really am excited about that one. It looks like pure trash. But it looks like Ricky's kind of pure trash. So see how they run. I'm pretty intrigued by that. I love a good mystery thriller. I heard it's cheap, fun, and that's my cup of tea. Pearl, I hated X, and I'll see Pearl at some point. I was supposed to see it last night, but I had some interviews instead. Speaking of interviews, I'll have some fun ones up for you guys next week. I had a blast talking to a few people yesterday on a couple movies coming out soon, including On the Come Up. I can talk about this one technically because it's coming out next week on Paramount Plus. Really, really liked the movie. It debuted at TIFF last week as well. Saw it, really enjoyed it. Comes from the same writer from I Hate You Give, Angie Thomas, who wrote the book I Hate You Give. Very well directed. Lead actress Jamila, she is incredible in the movie. But we're in the movie season. You know what I mean? Like, it's movie season. Like, we're in the next couple weeks. It's a little bit soft, a little bit slow, and it's been slow. And now we're finally getting into the groove of awards movies. We've got those coming up. I've got some trips coming up to AFI. We've got some award movies coming out from TIFF and stuff like that. But I'm excited to where we're at movie wise, and it's only going to get up. It's only going to go up from here. You know what I mean? Like, we have a fall slate that's massive. So including Babylon, which I cannot wait to see. If you guys thought I was unbearable around Elvis, which I still am, and I'm surprised Matthew Fox hasn't left me yet for that. But if you think I'm unbearable for Elvis, folks, just wait till Babylon, because Damien Chazelle can do no wrong in my eyes. So, yeah.
All this time this week with Chiefs fans has given me more patience.
Oh, look at you. I'm proud of you. I don't know if I take that as an insult or not, though. But folks, I'm excited because and make sure to do me a favor, folks. Check out Matthew Fox's show, his podcast, his movie podcast, and video. I love what you guys are doing, you and Eric. When's the next one of that? You got the episode up with Jaws, right?
Yep, we did our best of summer, and we looked at the original summer blockbuster Jaws. We will end up starting weekly toward the end of November, but our next one that's coming up, we're going to do a little horror movies. We're going to look at Smile, probably The Munsters, and Hocus Pocus 2. It will be on October the 2nd. September 30th is the Friday.
Fun thing about Smile, I heard that it was originally supposed to come out in just on streaming or just like on demand or whatever. And apparently the scores were so good that they decided to bring it out in theaters. So it kind of raised my excitement a little bit for it.
Well, and it's been a decent start to the horror movie season already with Barbarian and some of the ones that are coming out. I'm low key interested in the Munsters, which Netflix is not marketing at all, which drops on September 27th, the day before Blonde, which might be the biggest horror movie on Netflix this month.
I have that. I'm going to watch it this weekend. So,
dear Lord.
2 hours, like 45 minutes long. So.
Hocus Pocus 2, kind of curious about that. Eric and I will probably give our, I know we're definitely going to give a couple of classic films from our childhood, including the one that my mom found to try to scare me because I was insufferable about nothing scaring me.
Also, Meet Cute drops on Wednesday as well, by the way. Pete Davidson, Kelly Cuckoo.
It's a solid 1-star film.
Can't talk about it yet, but I love Pete Davidson, so...
Well, as a Titans fan, I understand.
Ouch! Damn it, Matthew Fox. On that note, make sure to follow Matthew Fox on Twitter at Nighthawk7734. Follow myself at Ricky Valero _. Make sure to check out the Music City Drive-In for all our latest articles and reviews. Matthew Fox, I hope you have the most bumpy, uncomfortable ride back on your flight from Arizona, and I'll talk to you next week.